You are now listening to The Survivor Series, a One Love Media production. Episode 9, ACAB, All Cops Are Burdened. This episode contains discussions about heavy topics, including suicide, PTSD, murder, and the mental toll of law enforcement. We understand these subjects can be triggering. Please take care of yourself while listening. If you or someone you know is experiencing thoughts of self-harm or suicide, we urge you to reach out for help. You can reach the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline by calling 988 or 1-800-273-TALK. That's 1-800-273-8255. Or text HOME, that's HOME, to 741-741 for the crisis text line. If you're struggling or need someone to talk to, please don't wait. There are people who care and who want to help. You don't have to go through this alone.
Before we get started, a quick note. This episode is not here to bash law enforcement. If you came here expecting to hear a one-sided perspective on the failings of law enforcement, I want you to know this episode will give you just as much respect as it does critique. We're diving into both the struggles and the strengths of law enforcement today, acknowledging the issues while emphasizing the ways that we can support officers, improve their careers, and make a positive change within the profession. The goal here is to spark a real conversation about what it means to be an officer, the toll it takes, and how we can all do better together. Now, with that said, let's get started. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Survivor Series, the podcast where we get real about the tough conversations, the hard truths, and the stories that are often left untold. Today, we're diving into a topic that stirs emotions and brings out our strong opinions. Law enforcement. Now, I'm sure you've all heard the acronym ACAB. All cops are bastards. But today we're challenging that notion, examining it from a deeper perspective and giving voice to the complexities behind the badge. So grab a seat, take a deep breath, and let's explore what it really means to wear the uniform. When you hear the acronym ACAB, what comes to mind? For many, it's a symbol of protest, a rallying cry against injustice, a rejection of systems that perpetuate violence and inequality. But is that all it is? Or is there more beneath the surface? Today, we're taking a step back to look at the real meaning behind that phrase and how it's evolved into something that reflects the burden, the pain, and the complexity of being a cop in a world that seems so divided. What people often overlook is that ACAB, while it may seem like a broad generalization, is an expression of frustration. It's a statement about systemic failures that seem too vast and too entrenched to fix. But here's the thing. While the system is broken in many ways, the people within it aren't all the same. There are still good, dedicated officers, those who strive every day to serve their community with honor, integrity, and love for the job. But they, too, carry a burden. See, the uniform they wear often becomes a symbol of hate, even when they're doing their best to make a difference. Let's talk about the weight of that uniform. It's not just fabric and a badge. It's history, it's authority, it's responsibility, it's scrutiny, it's fear. Every day an officer steps into that role knowing that they'll be judged not just for their actions, but for the actions of every officer who has ever worn the badge before them. It's a constant balancing act, doing the job they swore to do while feeling like they're always on the edge of being hated by the very people they serve and protect. But there are good cops out there, good men and women who show up every day to protect and serve, and yet they're not immune to the hate. In fact, it's often worse for them. They bear the weight of their badge, but they also carry the burden of all the bad cops who have come before them, the ones who have made it harder for the good ones to be seen for who they truly are. And there's a deeper layer to this. It's a brutal truth that many officers don't talk about, the trauma they carry. Some of them cause it, yes, but many of them absorb it. The violence they witness, the decisions they have to make, the lives they have to save or take, it all piles up. They carry it home and it doesn't just go away. For a lot of them, the trauma of the job becomes a silent companion, one they can't shake off. Not because they don't want to, but because they don't know how to. It's like trauma is their mistress and they don't know how to break it off. This is where we start to see the complexity of being a cop. It's not just about law enforcement, it's about humanity. It's about wearing a uniform that's meant to symbolize protection and justice, but often feels like a target. It's about wanting to do good while constantly battling a system that sometimes makes it impossible. As we move forward in this episode, we have to confront the darker side of law enforcement, the corruption and evil that resides within certain officers who have betrayed their badge, their communities, and the trust placed in them. While most officers serve with honor and integrity, it's vital to acknowledge the few who turn the very institutions meant to protect people into something dangerous. We're talking about the officers whose actions have crossed the line, shattering lives and becoming symbols of the rottenness within a system that many would argue is broken beyond repair. These are the officers who abuse their power for personal gain, for cruelty, and for their own depravity. Let's start with the names that need no introduction. Derek Chauvin, Daniel Holtzclaw, and John Burge. These are just a few of the officers who have gained national notoriety for their horrific abuse of power. Chauvin, of course, is the officer responsible for the murder of George Floyd, a moment that galvanized the Black Lives Matter movement and ignited protests around the world. His actions were a direct example of the police brutality that has plagued marginalized communities, and the ripples of his crime continue to affect society at large. Then there's Daniel Holtzclaw, an Oklahoma police officer who preyed on vulnerable women during his time on the force, sexually assaulting at least 13 women while he was on duty. He used his position of power to exploit his victims, some of whom were victims of other crimes. His case is a brutal reminder of how some officers prey on the very people they're supposed to protect. And John Burge, a former Chicago police detective who was involved in the torture and abuse of suspects, is another infamous name in the history of police corruption. Burge's actions which involved beating and suffocating suspects to extract confessions, are a stain on the history of Chicago law enforcement. These are just a few of the cases where abuse of power went unchecked and led to a tragic, irreversible consequence. But the system that allowed these officers to continue their reign of terror must also be held accountable. Unfortunately, the corruption within law enforcement doesn't stop with police brutality and sexual assault. A chilling, disgusting trend has emerged in the recent years, with police officers being arrested on charges of child pornography. These cases are horrific, and to some, they might feel like an impossible reality. But sadly, it is a reality. In 2023 alone, there were a number of arrests involving police officers charged with child exploitation and pornography. Officers who were entrusted with upholding the law only to use their position of power to engage in the most heinous of acts. How could this happen? How do officers, people we trust to protect our communities, become perpetrators of such sick crimes? This is where the failure of the system comes into play. It's the failure of accountability, of oversight, and transparent investigations. We are left asking the questions. If these officers are getting away with such actions under the scrutiny they face, how many others are out there doing the same? It's not just about the abuse of power for personal gain. It's about the breakdown in the system that allowed these individuals to thrive in an environment that should have exposed them for the predators they are. But this isn't about the individuals. It's about a system that has failed to address these issues head on. The qualified immunity that shields officers from accountability, the internal affairs departments that often fail to do their jobs, and the thin blue line that protects the worst offenders. All of this contributes to the environment where corrupt officers are allowed to continue their actions without fear of consequences. This isn't just about a few bad apples in the bunch. It's about a culture that enables and protects these individuals. It's about a system that puts protecting the institution above protecting the people it was meant to serve. The dangerous and depraved behavior we see from some of these officers is a direct result of these systemic failures, and that must be addressed if real change is ever going to take place. Now that we've explored the dark side of law enforcement, let's shift gears a bit and focus on another tragic reality that cops face: being targets and killed while doing their jobs. It's a harsh, sobering truth. Police officers are ambushed and murdered every day in this country just for wearing the uniform. We've all heard the stories, seen the headlines, but how many of us really take a moment to think about the human cost of this violence? In the past few years, the number of police officers killed in the line of duty has spiked, with the rise in violence against law enforcement reflecting the growing tensions in society. Officers are ambushed while they're just going about their daily duties, sitting in their patrol cars, eating lunch, or even serving routine warrants. They're targeted by individuals who have no regard for life, no understanding of what it means to serve and protect. The terrorism of the badge is real. Police officers are being hunted. The worst part? Many of these attacks are happening in broad daylight, in public spaces, and in front of witnesses, showing that there are people out there who view law enforcement as the enemy and who feel justified in attacking those who serve. In 2023 alone, the numbers were staggering. Over 100 officers were killed in the line of duty, a number that's risen by almost 40% in just the past few years. While the majority of these deaths are caused by gun violence, it's not just physical attacks we need to worry about. Car accidents while responding to calls, violent confrontations, and other unforeseen dangers have led to police officers being murdered while on the job. It's a dangerous world out there, and for many officers, it's a constant threat they face every day. But it's not just the violence itself that we should be concerned about. It's the rhetoric and the hatred that fuels it. The anti-police sentiment that's been growing for years has led to a culture of fear and distrust. We've seen individuals and even organized groups publicly calling for violence against the police, encouraging others to take matters into their own hands. While it's crucial to acknowledge the systemic issues in law enforcement, we must also recognize the hate speech and violent rhetoric have contributed to targeting and killing officers. That only creates more tension and division in our society. The cycle of violence and anger doesn't solve anything. It only perpetuates further tragedy on both sides of the badge. If you've ever heard an officer's end of watch broadcasted, you know it's more than just an announcement. It's a heartbreaking call. A dispatcher announcing the loss of one of their own. The dispatcher calls the fallen officer's call sign 3 times, followed by a solemn end of watch. The officer's last shift is acknowledged. A final heartfelt rest easy, we've got it from here, fills the airwaves. And then the devastating tone pierces the silence. That moment doesn't just mark the end of an officer's life. It marks the beginning of an emotional burden carried by that dispatcher. These dispatchers are often the first to hear the call, the first to witness the tragedy unfold, and sometimes the last to speak to that officer that died. It's a duty that doesn't end when the broadcast is over. They're the ones who have to hold that grief, a grief that will never leave them, a pain they'll carry through every call they take for the rest of their careers. Despite the rising violence, it's important to honor and remember those officers who have lost their lives doing their jobs the right way. These officers who went to work every day knowing the risks, but believing in their duty to protect their communities. They didn't deserve to be targets. They didn't deserve to be ambushed or hunted. They are the officers who lived with integrity, who sought justice, and who paid the ultimate price for their service. Let's take a moment to share a few stories of officers who were tragically taken in the line of duty. We start with Officer Jason Rivera, a New York City police officer who was killed in 2022 while responding to a domestic violence call. Rivera had just graduated from the police academy and was full of hope and promise, eager to serve his community. He was tragically shot and killed, leaving behind a grieving family and a community that will forever remember his sacrifice. Officer Ella French, one of Chicago's finest, Officer French was tragically killed during a routine traffic stop in 2021. Her death was a reminder that no day is ever truly routine when you wear the badge. Officer French was known for her kindness, dedication, and her passion for making a difference. Her death shocked the city and brought attention to violence faced by officers on a daily basis. The reality is, when an officer is killed in the line of duty, it doesn't just affect the department. It affects families, friends, and entire communities. These officers leave behind widows, widowers, and children who will never see their loved ones again. It's heartbreaking to think of the empty chairs at the dinner tables, the vacant spaces in their homes, and the long-term emotional scars left behind. But despite the loss and pain, many families carry on, doing their best to keep the memory of their loved ones alive and fighting, to make sure their sacrifice wasn't in vain. It's easy to focus on the anger, the hate, and the violence. But we have to remember that law enforcement officers are human beings too. They're not just figures of authority. They're mothers, fathers, siblings, and friends. They leave behind people who love them just like any other member of society. The violence against them is a tragic reality that we can't ignore. And while we continue to fight for justice and reform, we must also remember those who pay the ultimate price in the service of their communities. There's a deep, quiet epidemic inside law enforcement that's often overlooked. The kind of pain and suffering that doesn't come with physical wounds, but is felt all the same. Depression, PTSD, and suicide. These are all the silent killers that haunt officers long after the uniform comes off. The emotional toll of the job is far more than just stress. It's not only the dangers of being shot at or responding to a horrific scene, it's the weight of carrying the trauma that so many law enforcement officers simply aren't equipped to deal with. And the problem isn't just the nature of the job, but the culture surrounding it. There's no room for weakness in a world that demands strength. No room for vulnerability in an environment that values toughness above all. But behind every badge is a human being, a person with emotions, fears, and mental health struggles. You don't hear about it much, but officers carry a load that is too heavy for any one person. Imagine every day facing a danger with no guarantee that you'll come home, and then seeing things that no one should ever witness: accidents, abuse, loss. It becomes an endless cycle of trauma that doesn't just vanish after the shift is over. And yet, in a job where being tough is worshipped, asking for help is seen as a weakness. This is where the silent killers thrive, hidden in the corners, covered by the shield, masked behind a brave face. In the US, more officers die by suicide each year than are killed in the line of duty. It's estimated that anywhere between 150 to 200 officers take their own lives annually, and yet it's not something that gets the same attention. The suicide rates in law enforcement are staggering, more than double the national average for their professions. And the divorce rates? Those are high too. The stress of the job, the hours, the emotional strain, it wears on families and relationships. Substance abuse becomes a crutch for many. Alcohol, drugs, and even prescription medications to numb the pain just to get through another shift. But these vices don't heal. They just mask the problem until it explodes in ways that are often tragic. And there are some departments trying to change this culture. Some are offering peer support programs, mental health resources, and strategies to address the stigma. But the resistance is strong. Old habits die hard, and there's a pervasive belief in the tough it out mentality that's been passed down for generations. For too many, admitting the need for help isn't an option. It's a betrayal of the very ethos of their job. But it's more than that, isn't it? Dr. Laura Ellick, a veteran psychologist who specializes in grief and trauma therapy, who I recently had the pleasure of sitting down with to discuss the mentality behind school shootings, told me that officers who feel the need to talk to someone find themselves in a difficult position because the very departments that hire these support companies often have clauses in their contracts that mandate the companies report back, adding to the officer's file after a session. That not only leaves officers vulnerable, but can lead to disciplinary actions or even job loss. Dr. Ellick suggested that if officers felt the need to talk to someone, they should seek outside help, a therapist not contracted by their department. But even then, they would have to pay out of pocket just so their employer wouldn't find out. So why do we ignore this? Why does the same system that allows a cop fired for misconduct at one agency to find a new job at another prevent officers from seeking mental health help without consequences? It's a system that truly doesn't protect its own. The truth is, reform isn't just about policy changes, better training, or accountability. It's also about acknowledging the humanity of those who wear that badge. Until we can do that, we'll continue to lose our officers in silence to the mental health crises they can't speak about. To the officers who may be listening, who are struggling, who are hurting, who feel like they have no one to turn to, know this: you're not alone. Your struggles are real and your pain matters. The weight you carry doesn't have to be borne in silence. There is help, and it's okay to reach out. It's not a weakness. It's a strength. And for those officers that feel they need to speak to somebody, I will be giving links to websites you can use that are confidential after the show. For those who love and support officers, reach out, check in, just ask, how are you really doing? It may seem like a small gesture, but for some who are facing these invisible battles, it could be the difference between life and death. The silent killers are real, but they don't have to win. Change is possible. One conversation, one small act of compassion at a time. And for those officers who need it, there is hope. Keep fighting. Keep reaching out and know that there is always help available. What the badge represents versus who wears it is a fundamental contradiction. To many, it's a symbol of authority, power, and protection. But to those who wear it, the badge often represents something more complicated. Sacrifice, struggle, deeply ingrained sense of duty. It's the weight of an ideal, an expectation, and at times the pressure to conform to a standard that may not always align with personal values or mental health. We've all heard the phrase, not all cops are bastards, but the truth is, all cops are burdened. They carry the weight of a history they didn't create, but one that they are bound to as long as they wear that uniform. The public's perception, the scrutiny, and the mistrust that exists between the community and law enforcement, it's a lot to bear. And while it's easy to dismiss or generalize, it's important to remember that these officers are human beings. Their capacity for empathy, their ability to make the right decisions under pressure, and the emotional well-being matter just as much as the badge they wear. No one puts on the badge without inheriting the weight of its past. For every officer, there is a certain responsibility that comes with that. A responsibility to uphold the law, yes, but also to navigate the complexities of being part of an institution that is constantly in the spotlight. This is not an easy feat. It means carrying the burden of not just protecting and serving, but also of changing the narrative. A narrative that is often defined by public perception and not by personal experience. So what does reform look like, both from the inside and the outside? It's not just about policy changes or implementing new training. It's about understanding the humanity of the person behind the badge. It's about creating a culture of care and compassion where the mental health and well-being of officers are just as important as their physical safety. It's about a shift in thinking, a move toward acknowledgement that those who serve are not immune to the trauma they witness daily. But real change can only happen if we do not shy away from the truth, the full truth. That includes confronting systemic issues and acknowledging the emotional cost of the job and having difficult conversations about what it means to be an officer in today's world. It's not enough to demand change from the outside. We must also be willing to help those inside the system heal and evolve. Before we close, I want to tell you a personal story about someone I call a hero, though he'd probably just call himself a man in a uniform. His name is Charlie Hallam, and his story is one of humanity, kindness, and integrity, qualities that can often get lost in the conversation about law enforcement. Charlie Hallam. To most people, that name means nothing to them. To some, he's just another asshole cop who arrested them. To a few, he's a friend or family. But to me, he's Charlie. He's a hero, and he's my savior. I first met Charlie after I moved to Cloverdale, Indiana in 2004. He was chief of police for Cloverdale. He was also their only canine handler, as Cloverdale roughly had a population of 1,200. Every kid at Cloverdale schools knew and loved Canine Alec. Charlie would bring him into the school during the morning arrival to greet kids, not because we had a bad school, not because he was mandated to be there with the dog, but because he had kids he brought to school and, alongside Alec, loved being around the children. It wasn't until I got kicked out of my house in the middle of winter, in the middle of the night, by my mom, that I really got to know Charlie. Without knowing what to do, I did the one thing I could think of. I called the police station, which was out of the jurisdiction of where I was, only hoping that Charlie was on duty. And he was. And while I didn't expect him to drive out of his jurisdiction to pick me up off the side of the road, that's exactly what he did. I expected him to just give me some advice and, say best of luck. But he gave me a place to sleep at the station and said, "I don't know what's going on, nor will I pry, but if you need to talk, I will be here to listen." Charlie, like most people in the Bible Belt, was a firm believer in God. He didn't come out and tell you. He didn't preach at you. He didn't even mention God that much. But he didn't have to, because he showed it through his actions. Years have passed now, and from time to time, I'll message him to let him know that I'm doing okay, and to remind him that I always pray for him because of the uniform he wears. I've had the privilege of meeting other cops that carry the same value as Charlie, but none of them will ever be him. He is living, breathing proof that not all cops are bastards or bad. And Charlie, if you ever get to listen to this, I want you to know that while I know you'll never accept the title of hero, I speak for the few that have had the pleasure of knowing you to say that you are every letter and then some. To all the Charlie Hallums out there, know that we see you, know that we care for you, and that we pray for your safety and your families. There will never be enough of you, and I hope that your communities show you as much love as I do for Charlie. Thank you so much for listening, and good night.
For law enforcement professionals who are struggling, please know you're not alone. Here are some resources that offer confidential help. Badge of Life, a nonprofit dedicated to supporting the emotional and mental health of law enforcement. They offer confidential counseling, peer support, and resources. You can find more info at badgeoflife.com. COPS, Concerns of Police Survivors. While primarily focused on helping the families of fallen officers, they also offer mental health resources for law enforcement officers who are struggling. Their website is nationalcops.org. Blue Help, an organization offering resources, peer support, and crisis counseling specifically for law enforcement. More info at bluehelp.org. Thank you for listening. This episode of the Survivors series was hosted by Kyle Fields, written and researched by Mary Rodriguez, and produced by One Love Media. All rights reserved. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to follow us on social media and subscribe for future episodes. Until next time, stay safe and stay strong.